Hello there. Thanks for coming. Thanks for braving the elements, and happy spring. This is the first day of spring. I just got in from shoveling the sidewalk. Anson Tebbetts was appointed by Governor Phil Scott to be the Secretary of Agriculture, Food and Markets in 2016. Anson grew up on his family's dairy farm in Cabot. That's not how you pronounce it. Where they raised Jersey cows, kept sheep, and operated a Vermont maple sugaring business. Alongside farming, Anson built a long and successful career in broadcasting, working in both radio and television. An award-winning reporter and storyteller, he served as a newsroom manager, overseeing teams of reporters, editors, and photographers. In 2025, Vermont Biz Magazine chose Anson as one of the inaugural 91 influencers here in the state of Vermont. A devoted birder and nature enthusiast, Anson also hosts a weekly radio segment for the birds on Radio Vermont. Please join me in welcoming Anson Tebbetts.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon. This is what I think we call this sugar snow. So the positive thing is this is good for sugaring. So, and we're all right in the middle of sugaring right now. And this weekend is Maple Open House Weekend, if you don't know. So if you go to the Maple Sugar Makers Association website, they have a map where you can map out where you might want to visit. And I know a couple places have pancake breakfasts and so forth, but we're right in the middle of sugaring, so it's pretty important. I want to start with a quiz, because I know you are lifelong learners. So we have 6 dairy breeds in Vermont. And why don't we begin? So what's one dairy breed? What's the Ben and Jerry's one? Black Holstein. So Holstein. So the Holstein would be number 1. That would be probably the most popular one. It produces the most milk, but does not have as much butterfat. So it produces, Holstein now, they can give over 100 pounds a day. So a lot of milk, big production, black and white. And then a second one. So that's number 1. We got 2. What's the second breed? Brown Swiss. So the Brown Swiss is the kind of a gray, kind of bigger, almost bigger than a Holstein, kind of lumbering. And you may recognize it from Shelburne Farms. So Shelburne Farms, you see them out in the pasture. They have a herd of Brown Swiss. They make good cheese. And someone said that, my hair was turning gray, but I refer to it as Brown Swiss. So I have Brown Swiss hair. So they're kind of this big lumbering gray, gentle giant cow. So that's 2. Third one? Guernsey. Good call. Guernsey, if folks are familiar with Guernsey, they're kind of a subtle reddish with white, kind of like a Holstein, but they're a little sort of reddish color. And if you're familiar with Stratford Dairy makes ice cream, and it's in a bottle milk, and you'll probably find it at City Market or Healthy Living around here, and you return the bottle, and then they fill it again for you when you come back. Stratford Dairy, but they have a herd of Guernseys in Stratford. So that's 3. 4. Jersey. I say Jersey was usually number 2. People usually shout out Jersey's number 2. Jersey is that sort of smaller brown one, but has a lot of butter fat. So it tests really good for butter, good for cheese. Does not produce as much milk as probably the other breeds, but with protein and butter, it does well. And I think probably a lot of organic dairies have Jerseys. I had Jerseys growing up in Cabot. So Jersey, so that's 4. We got 2 more. We did Holstein. There is a Belted Galloway, but we don't I don't think we qualify. There's two belted Galloways. There's one that's a beef side, and then there's the it will milk. But belted Galloway, I think we have them down here, right? Down to Philo? Yeah, the cookie, they look like an Oreo cookie, the belted Galloway. All right, we got two more. Correct, Ashir. That is the red and white. It's a darker red than the Guernsey. And it can be kind of ornery. It can be a little ornery. But we tried an Ashir when I was growing up, and we weren't very successful with it, so we never got another one. But an Ashir. And we don't have a lot of Ashir herds in Vermont. All right, so that's 5. We got one more, and this is the one that is very few herds. Two words. It's solid rust red, dark. Close. That was close. It was close to. You said Devon. Devon is close, very close. If you look on the Vermont, you got a Vermont flag here anywhere? If you look on the Vermont flag, you'll see a red cow. That is a Devon. That is red Devon. And the red Devon, there was a gentleman in Lindenville that had one of the last remaining milking herds in the United States of the red Devon. And you'll see them on the Vermont flag. And then the other thing they were used for is if you see old-time sugaring operations where they hauled the sap, they have a team of oxen with a red Devon. No, that's a beef breed. That is the one that we have some incredible herds in Vermont. That is the one, the really fuzzy ones. If anyone, you remember the Trapp Family Lodge? So you go to Trapp's has a herd of them. There's a herd in Plainfield it's really good. Those are the really fuzzy ones, and the horns go like this. And Highlanders. And there's a gentleman, and I think there's a gentleman, Mr. Karst from Heinsberg, brought them to the United States. I think Henry Karst. Yeah, Henry Karst did. It was a farmer, but he brought them to the United States. It is the milking shorthorn is the 6th one. You should have looked it up on the computer. Oh, okay, you're looking at me. I thought we had the computer going here, or someone's on their phones. So so that's the quiz. That's the quiz on dairy breeds. So when I begin with dairy, so dairy in Vermont is, we've done some economic analysis. It's about a $5.4 billion industry, so it's significant. We have approximately 450 dairy farms in Vermont, all shapes, sizes, styles. We have herds that are more than 700 cows. And we kind of categorize them in 3 ways in Vermont because of regulations that we have. So we have small farm operations, we have medium farm operations, and then we have large farm operations. So in Vermont, we have 36 farms that are over 700 cows. So there are some significant, and by national standards, that can actually be small, because if you go to places, for example, maybe in California, they can have herds, or Idaho, they can have herds over 10,000 or 20,000. Minnesota, some of those bigger herds. But for the most part, because of our land, we do not have as large a herd. So we probably have one farm that has, I think the largest one would be maybe 4,000 head, but they're spread over multiple farms. And then in the middle is 200 to 699, and then on the smaller side, 25% of our farms, dairies in Vermont, are organic. So we have some of the largest concentration of organic farms in Vermont, and they sell to 2 main buyers. One is Stonyfield, which is in southern New Hampshire, and the other is Organic Valley, which is a national co-op based out of Wisconsin. And then we also have some national value-added companies, anything from Cabot Cheddar, which is a national brand, so they have Cabot cheese, they're making whey powder, they're making butter, they're making sour cream, all nationally recognized. And they're owned by a co-op called Agamark. And Agamark is the co-op, the brand is Cabot. And Cabot has built a very strong brand over the years, so you can find it just about anywhere. Have a strong presence in, Florida. Was one of their early adapters because so many Vermonters decided to take their winter off and go down there. So they use that as a marketing tool, so you'll find it in all the big retailers down there. Ben & Jerry's is another one, and they buy Vermont milk from something called DFA, Dairy Farmers of America, out of St. Albans. So that's another co-op. It's a national co-op, but the local presence is out of St. Albans. And they provide the milk and the cream for Ben & Jerry's. And then we have another a national brand called Vermont Creamery. And Vermont Creamery is a goat dairy and a butter dairy. And it's owned by Land O'Lakes. It was started by a Vermont couple about 30 years ago, and about 5 years ago was sold to Land O'Lakes. And one part of the growth that we're seeing in dairy is goats. So anyone want to start a goat farm, we need goat's milk for this creamery. So we've had one farmer, two brothers in Hyde Park, called the Jones brothers and their family. They were at a crossroads about which way to go. Were they going to get bigger? They had 300 cows, and they said, do we want to go bigger for efficiency? But we don't have enough land. What are we going to do? So they took the plunge, and they're milking over 1,000 goats. And right now is kidding season in Hyde Park. And they're early in the transition, and I think they want to get to about 1,500 goats. So they're a major supplier for Vermont Creamery, but we don't have enough goat's milk in Vermont, so we are relying on Canada, actually. So Vermont Creamery gets some of its goat's milk from Canada. And it's quite a fascinating story. This all happened right during COVID for the Jones brothers. They're making the transition. They've sold the dairy cows. The goats are coming. And to milk goats, it's a totally different infrastructure because the cows, it's 4 teats, and the goats 2. So you've got to have a different machine. So they had to go find the machine. So it's called a rotational machine. I don't know if you may have seen them, but it's basically a round circle, and the goats go in and it kind of rotate around. It moves slowly, and you go from goat to goat and put the machine on and milk it. So this rotational system, it's very efficient, and 2 people can milk probably 70, 80 goats at a time. So right during COVID, they had to go get this milking system in Canada. And at that point, the border was essentially closed except for essential stuff. So they were agriculture, and agriculture was that. So they go up across the border, COVID, all the restrictions. They have to take it apart, haul it back to Vermont, and then put it together. And some of the goats had already arrived, but the baby goats were not supposed to arrive for another month. Well, lo and behold, someone's breeding chart was off, and the goats started having their kids. So can you well imagine that they're trying this whole new system, whole new animals. It's COVID, but these guys have done it, and they like their journey they're on now. But you'll find Vermont Creamery cheese, the logs, you'll see it. They have different flavors. And then on the other side, they do a cultured butter as well. You'll see their butter, and it's in Berrytown. That's where they manufacture it. So that's kind of the goat thing. We also need more sheep's milk, so if anyone wants to milk sheep, and that's for cheesemakers. We have a company called Grafton Cheese down in Grafton, and they make a combination cow's milk and sheep's milk cheese, and it's really, really good. But we need more people they need more milk from sheep, and they're relying on the Amish out of New York to supply a lot of that milk. So that's an interesting aspect of theirs. And we have a couple of other, Vermont Shepherd as well in southern Vermont. They make an incredible cheese as well. And then there's all kinds of sprinkled about. We probably have 50 to 60, and I'll call them artisan cheesemakers. They may have animals on the farm, process the cheese, market it, and sell directly to consumers. One that's significant that's grown over the last 15 years is Jasper Hill. You may be familiar with Jasper. They're in Greensboro. The gentleman who started that and their families did not have an agriculture background. They started milking cows. They started making cheese. Just last week, they have this giant, massive cheese competition in Wisconsin. It's an international cheese competition. And I think there's 3,000 entries that people all over the world, Switzerland, Netherlands, United States, Wisconsin, Vermont. And they have a top 20, so there's only at the end of the show, and there's different categories. And Vermont did very well. You know, Cabot won for its sour cream this year, and they won for their dry powder and lots of cheeses and stuff. But Jasper, there are 20 finalists, and only 2 American cheeses were in the top 20, and Jasper had one of them. So, it just takes a lot of work and dedication for that. But there are many other small, we have smaller goat operations and so forth. So it's kind of cool, and it's the value added. And the other thing that happened, that a lot of this stuff is now being shipped in the mail. It's a little bit different. COVID changed a little bit. It's come back some. But during COVID, their market was essentially restaurants or cheese shops in the bigger areas. So Boston, New York, higher value, sent it that way. Well, when everything shut down, that market collapsed. So you can well imagine some of these cheesemakers were at risk of having to close because of that. Overnight, we're not buying your cheese. So they pivoted, and a lot of them decided, all right, we're going to put it in a box and we're going to put it in the mail. So so you can go online now and find cheese, and they'll ship it to you in dry ice, and you can have it immediately. So a lot of them have done that. And during COVID, there were a number of companies that may have gotten together and put a box together as well. So it could have been a jam, a cheese, maybe some meat or something like that, some dried meat or something like that. So that's changed a little bit. But so many specialty products now are shipped in the mail as opposed to maybe finding it in a retail operation. And one thing we try to do in Vermont is with all our visitors that come, we want them to have a good experience, have good food, have good drink, and if we do that, it's more than likely they're going to go to their computer and say, what cheese was that I had up there in Vermont? And they're going to order it online. So that's one way that it's important to have a good experience for all our visitors and our guests. And agriculture plays a part in our whole tourism economy with that. And then the other thing that's grown a little bit over the years is agritourism. So people opening up their farms to visitors to milk a cow, feed the goats. In fact, there's one in Charlotte. If you're feeling a little down, I think she's right off Mount Philo Road. You can go and snuggle with her baby goats. You can pay a fee, but and she's making wonderful cheese. She's one of that me? Oh, okay. She's making cheese as well. And butter, and she's got a nice, beautiful little facility, but all the kidding is happening now. So if you want to spend an hour and a half with a little goat and feel better, it's down in Charlotte. So agritourism is a part of what people are doing. And the general trend is people are looking for real experiences now, and agriculture can play a part of that. And there are people that will, pay something, if they're visiting. Like traps. I went on a tour of traps. You can see the herd of Highlanders if you want to. You can gather in the ski lodge, and then the farmer will walk you down, and you can learn about the history of Von Traps, but you also can learn about the animals they have there and get pretty close to them. They have this giant bull, though. He's beautiful. He's just giant. I can't remember his name. He has a cool name, but he's giant. He's just a beautiful. And they're out in the snow right now because they love the outdoors. So agritourism plays a pretty important role of our farm economy. So I probably should tell you what we actually do at the Agency of Agriculture, a little bit what we do. So Agency of Agriculture, our main office is in Montpelier, 116 State Street. It's a beautiful brownstone. It was the original National Life building, 1916. A lot of granite, a lot of marble, 4 stories, looks directly across the State House. So it's a beautiful, beautiful building. And we essentially have 6, I'll call them divisions. So there's the administration division, which I'm part of. So we deal with policy, politics, direction of the agency, working with the public, sort of the oversight, the budget, all that good stuff. So one part of what we do is, let's begin with, we have a lab in Randolph. So it's right on the Vermont State University campus, which is the old VTC campus. We have a lab there, and that serves lots of things. So we do water quality testing there. So if we got water samples come in from lakes and rivers and so forth, we can test those. We test milk. So if a farmer wants to have his milk tested for, either bacteria or maybe butter fat and so forth, they can bring it there, and we do that for the creameries and all the milk processors. We have feed and fertilizer that we test to make sure it's okay. So they serve, and they're all, scientists, and the equipment in there is just incredible what they do. So there's probably about 20 people that work in the lab in Randolph. And we also, part of the lab also services the Department of Environmental Conservation, so Agency of Natural Resources as well. So part of the lab is with them. Fish and Wildlife has a presence there. And the other part is we have something called weights and measures. So it's kind of a neat part of the agency. So if you go look next time you gas up, look at the gas pump, you're going to see a little sticker. It's going to have when the last time that gas pump was checked by us to make sure it's accurate. So when you're paying for gas, and I bet the phone is going to start ringing now. This is what happens. The phone is going to start ringing because you've noticed the gas price has gone up, 60, 70 cents in the last couple of weeks. It's going up. So people are going to start, we usually get more calls. So it's all based on consumer assurance. So we want to make sure what you're paying for is accurate when you're pumping it in. So we inspect it. That's one aspect of weights and measures, but we're also in Hannaford, so make sure that the scales are accurate. So when you're buying your deli meat, it's all working. When you put something on the register for head of lettuce, that has to be accurate. So those guys have all their gear that they make sure that they're all calibrated correctly. So we do that with inspections. And the other big thing we do is we assure that the checkout counter marches your slip when you're at the checkout counter. So, and there are errors. So we have spot checks. It's usually nothing that's intentional, but it's usually the management or just when prices, and the other thing, when we had that really big spike in inflation a couple of years ago when things were changing daily, it was very hard for them to keep track of the price that's in the aisle. So you got the price this is what it costs. That should match when you check out, when you get your slip. Well, it was changing rapidly, so there was a lot of errors. So we do a lot of education, we do a lot of compliance checks, and it's all based on consumer assurance. And we do paving trucks to make sure the scales are right on that. So, and then we do hydrometer. So the hydrometer is a key part of the device to make sure the density is correct in maple syrup. So we do thousands of checks on those to make sure they're calibrated correctly. So they work out of the lab down in Randolph. So weights and measures is one thing that we do. And the new part of weights and measures, if anyone has an electric vehicle, anyone have an electric vehicle? Yeah, so that's a whole new world we're used to gas, but we got to make sure when you go to a place that you charge up, it's accurate. And when we're paying for electricity. So that's a new part of what we're going to be doing with weights and measures as it's evolved over time. So I think they've nationally settled on all the calibration, what needs to be done, and now we're going to be starting to do spot checks on to make sure that they're getting what you paid for. All consumer assurance. So that's one part. We have an entomology. So we go out and collect ticks. As we know, there are a lot of ticks. Anyone that does a lot of walking or running or hiking or gardening, has dogs, walk your dog, you bring your dog in. I have a little white dog, so it's easy for me to find ticks. But, and we check them for disease. So we collect them in the spring, summer. They go to the lab, they're checked. And we found on average about 50% of all the ticks we're collecting now are carrying potential carrying the Lyme disease. So we share that so we know where the trends are, we know where the counties are, and we work with the Department of Health on that. So yeah, ticks, not only with Lyme disease, which is a really tough disease. We work on that, and we also do mosquitoes. So we collect mosquitoes and have those tested, and we check for, mosquitoes can carry diseases as well. We have a couple mosquito districts in Vermont. Anyone that's been down to Dunmore, Leicester, Brandon, so they have little districts that they're really have a lot more mosquitoes than other places. So we work with those districts on managing those, and they may have to do applications from time to time to control the population. So, like triple E is a disease we watch for. So each week we go out and collect, each week we test, we get results, and every Friday I get an email and we all go, we don't have it. But we have to do it because some of those diseases are really, we don't want. And sometimes it goes in trends. A couple years ago, last year was pretty quiet, and maybe because it was drier. But when we usually have a wet spring, we're going to get a lot more mosquitoes. So we do entomology, which is kind of cool. We have a whole plant industry as well. So nurseries, we make sure that nurseries are not bringing something in that's going to, be bad for the environment or bring disease in. We inspect Christmas trees that are exported. So there's a Christmas tree farmer that sends a bunch of trees to Bermuda each year, real ones. So we go and inspect them and make sure they can go to another place. So there's a little bit of work we do. We also manage the pesticide, feed, and fertilizer. So I sign a lot of permits for example, golf courses. So golf courses need to follow, they may use some application that uses a pesticide. So they have rules and regulations they must follow. They must, what they can use, they can't use. People got to be trained. So they have to have a permit from us to do that. We also have a lot of people that may be applicators, but they have to have a license from us, and they must pass a test before they can do that in a commercial way. So every Wednesday, we hold a test for people that want to be a pesticide applicator. And we've just moved to an online format for folks. It used to be all in person, but now we've got the software where people do not necessarily have to come to the office and take the test. And so we have a lot of, it could be like the orchins, like an orchid company. They need to be certified and pass a test before they can be a professional. So we do that. And then we have water quality. So we have a water quality division. And the main part of that is to protect the waterways from pollution. So we have people that do education, technical assistance, and inspections. I mentioned large farms. Large farms are inspected every year for something called Required Agriculture Practices, or RAPs. So farmers have to follow strict guidelines. No manure can get to the waterway. There's certain buffers they must have. They must manage their manure. So they must have a nutrient management plan. So they have to have capacity to hold manure. They must have enough land base to apply that manure. So April 1, Vermonters are not allowed, farmers are not allowed to spread manure in the wintertime. But April 1 is the trigger date when they can spread manure. They can get a variance from me if there's a danger of a pit overtopping or getting to our waterway, but it must continue to follow the regulations of Vermont. So farmers are not going to like this right now with extra snow, because you also can't spread on snow, even though it could be. So, you know, their holding tanks are getting pretty full right now. So they're going to be wanting to spread manure pretty quickly here on April 1, which is not too far away, but every day counts. In my 10 years, we've had 1 year where I didn't have to give a variance, which was pretty extraordinary, because everything really has to line up perfectly sometimes to do that to happen, because you really have to have a nice fall where the manure can get applied after corn cutting. And then you've got to have kind of a normal spring where it's not too muddy, there's still not snow on the ground in April. But a lot of the places, southern Vermont doesn't have much snow right now. This area didn't have much snow until about 2 hours ago. But we're not out of the woods yet. So we do water quality, and that's one thing that we do. And we probably have about 30 people working in water quality. And we have engineers too. So we have engineers that help farmers build containment storage facilities, whether it be a bunker or whether it be a manure pit. And then we work with the federal government as well with that, and their cost share programs, both the federal government and us, to help with that. The focus has been on soil health, making sure that the soil can absorb as much moisture as possible. And in the last 3 years, and I'll talk about the weather just a little bit, the last 3 years have been probably the most severe for farmers in a long, long time. 23, remember the flood, severe weather. 24, we had a repeat in July. And then last year, it decided to go the completely opposite, and we had the drought, and we're still in a drought. So the snow is actually probably good as well for that, but we're still in a drought. Last spring started out okay, and it really didn't rain in a lot of places at all summer long, well into the fall. So with that, we have to assess the damage that's been done. So we did a survey. So we asked farmers to report their losses to us, and 200 farmers responded, and the losses just on those 200 farmers was well over $15 million. So you've got fruits and veggie farmers, you've got hay loss, you've got pasture loss, burnt pastures. So it has a lingering effect. The corn crop in many places is really, really bad, and corn is really important for animal feed because it produces a lot of milk and is used a lot. So that comes off the two, and the floods was about $54 million in losses across the state. And some of those same farmers have gotten hit 3 times. And the farmers will tell us that they can usually weather one event every decade, but it's really tough to manage kind of 3 weather events in a row. So we're hoping for a really boring summer. That is the goal. But so it's important to have that data, because we can take that data, and if we need to go to the legislature or if we need to go to Congress, and we were successful in the weather events of getting a block grant from Congress, thanks to our delegation working on it. So we will receive about $30 million for severe weather that happened in 23 and 24. And so we hope to distribute some of those dollars, and some of it may help with mitigation strategies, because some of the farmers are deciding, I don't want to be right in the floodplain anymore with my hoop house. I may want to move it. So we're hoping maybe we can help with that. So those dollars should be coming this year. And so Vermont received about $31 million to try to mitigate some of the losses from 23 and 24. And I should mention 23 began with a severe frost after everything was budded and bloomed. Remember, the apples were all blooming and ready to go, and the vineyard down here in Shelburne, they lost all their grapes. So it began with a severe frost, and it never stopped for like 2 years after that. So they could be eligible for some assistance from that. But the data is really important to gather, because you just don't want to go say, like, you got to have some real numbers. So we think this survey that we got will be important as we move forward with that. I should talk about maple, because maple is right in the middle of the season here. We produce about 3 million gallons of maple in Vermont each season, which is number 1 in the country. 50% of all the maple in the United States comes out of Vermont. So we can brag. And and that's another industry that's changed dramatically. You may have operations that may have a few thousand taps. Some may have 10,000 taps. Some may have 50,000 taps. We have one sugar maker in the Northeast Kingdom that has more than 400,000 taps, trees, 400,000. So, and it's marketed mostly out of Vermont. 9-ounce glass bottles, 12-ounce glass bottles, and they're shipped to the Walmart, Kroger, all those places, but it's made in the Northeast Kingdom. It's an organic operation. And they essentially start tapping their trees in early December. So the sugar makers in Vermont, the old thing is you wanted to be tapped by town meeting day. So the first week in March, that was the old adage. But with weather patterns, bigger operations, they're starting to get in the woods in late December, January. This season, I think, is going okay. It was slow. Usually we do make some maple in February. I don't think very many sugar makers made any maple in February this year because it was so darn cold. The magic for maple is warm days, not too warm days, but warm days, and then cold nights. So it definitely froze last night. I think maybe this morning it may have run a little bit, but it looks like it's cooled off a little bit. And it's so variable, you never know. The wind could play a big factor, elevation plays a big factor. So essentially, below 32 at night, above 32 in the day, not too hot. And when it's all done is when the trees start budding. So when the trees start budding, then you're pretty much done sap. Pretty simple system. It's sap comes out of the tree, you boil it down, it becomes maple. But there's a lot of technology that's been used over the last few years, something called reverse osmosis. So a lot of them are taking the water out of the sap, and you're just left with the main sugar, and then they're boiling the sugar down, which is saving, it's a lot quicker process, but you're also saving a lot on fuel. So you're only boiling basically the sugar and not boiling off the water. So it goes a lot faster. So they're saving some money on fuel. So old days you may have boiled all day, you may now only maybe boil a couple of hours. And they're different operations. You've got people that still do wood, you've got some do propane, some do oil, some use steam part of it. But the technology is really incredible with what's happening with maple, but the basics are all there. We have a wonderful research facility in Vermont at UVM called the Proctor Center. So they do incredibly wonderful work up there in Underhill, Jericho. So that whole world is really quite incredible. And we'll know around June 15th how the season went, because there'll be a report by USDA through their statistics of how much was produced. New York produces a little bit. The world leader is Quebec, of course. So Quebec, and they have a different system up there. They have a supply management system. So their farmers, the producers, they can't expand without permission, but they control the price, and they have a reserve. Do you ever remember the big heist a few years ago? And there was a movie made out of it. So it was all on the barrels, and the manager or someone with security, they didn't know They weren't looking in the barrels, and over time they'd been siphoned off, and it was millions of dollars that was stolen of maple syrup and resold. But we have strong maple laws in Vermont: density, color, flavor. So that's another part that we do with our agency. Animal health is another one that we do. So we look for diseases. We've had something in the United States called bird flu you may have heard about. Luckily in Vermont, we've only had, I think, 4 backyard cases. So we have not had any commercial flocks. But across the United States, billions of dollars has been spent and lost. So the deal is if you get it and you have a poultry operation, everything must be euthanized or killed. It's in the operation. So thousands and thousands and millions of birds have to go because of spread of disease. So turkey places, Pennsylvania is going through one right now. And it has had an impact on Vermont because I've been told it's difficult to get it may be difficult to get the chicks now because some of those operations are not being able to produce enough birds for us to have our backyard birds or our layers or our meat birds. So it does have an impact. And there's all things about transportation of moving animals. There's also been the cow side of the bird flu, the bovine side. The Northeast has not had it. Vermont has not had it. We've tested. We've done every bulk tank in Vermont. The holding container for milk, not present. And the good thing about that one is pasteurization kills it. So pasteurization continues to, protect that part of it. But we have not had any in the Northeast. I think the closest state that has had it to us is Ohio. Started in the West, in the Midwest, and has a lot to do with the movement of animals. And they believe it's transmitted by mechanical means. So if a cow has it, and then the next machine gets on another cow, it goes through that system. But the big fear whether it would mutate and become, we went through COVID, but the animals get sick and for the most part have recovered, but there have been a few cases with some animals, I think like barn cats, that drink the raw milk and have perished through it. And luckily for the most part, the workers have been safe. There have been some cases of people getting ill, but for the most part, we've been okay with that. But luckily it has not come to Vermont, and we do not want it to come to Vermont. And we do sanitation as well. So we do a lot of inspections on farms for sanitation and also in milk facilities as well. So how am I doing on time? Is it question time now? Okay. So we have people that go farm to farm, making sure that the sanitation is okay on dairy farms. But we're also in the cheese plant, the milk plant, to make sure that they're following all the sanitation rules with that. So that's another thing to do. About 80% of our work is regulatory, believe it or not. But and the other 20% is economic development. So the other part that we do is we support the various industries. We have something called the Working Lands program. In the Working Lands program, we get about $1 million per year from the legislature, and that supports grants for infrastructure for farmers to make it more affordable. So if they want to put in, they want to buy a pasteurizer, we through a competitive process, bidding process, application process, we may be able to grant them a $50,000 grant. Also, the wood products industry is eligible for that. So value added is important now with wood products. So people making something out of wood into a product, so they're eligible as well. So we provide that support. We have $1 million. The last round we had $6 million worth of requests. So tremendous need. But it's based on anyone that's making a living off the land. So that's the goal that we're trying to do with that one. So the economic, but we work with associations. So we may work with the sugar makers, we may work with the bee people, the honey people, the apple folks, the specialty products group. We take a group of Vermont companies down to something called the Fancy Food Show in New York, and that's where buyers come and see people who are selling a product. And, you know, hundreds, thousands of people go through the Jacob Javits Center and look at products, and they consider buying them. So we had a Vermont pavilion last summer. We had about 20 Vermont companies that went. They spend 3 days, and buyers come by the booth, and hopefully they can entice them to think about buying their product and putting it on their shelves. So there's that economic development part that we do. And I think that's all we do. So it's a mighty force of about 135 people. So, but many of them have ag backgrounds, and it's kind of a cool place. I'm very fortunate to be there. So, and I can talk about birds if you want to. I can. So, what do you think? I'm happy to take any question.
Thank you, Anson. That's a wide range of subjects you covered, right, with no notes or anything.
Well,
so, as usual, we'll take questions. There's people on Zoom that Kathy has over there, and
we got one in the back, right?
let's start with Zoom.
Hello. Oh, there we go. Please share a message about Vermont agriculture that you think could use promotion.
I think a message is get to know your farmer. If you can, visit one, engage with them. We have something called Breakfast on the Farm, and I don't know if they've set a date or if they're going to have one this year. It's usually in midsummer. And they open up, it's usually a dairy farm, so you can go and see what a dairy farm looks like. You get a breakfast, a meal. You can go from station to station. But I think one of the most important things we all can do is to learn and listen, engage, and anything you can do to support them in any way. And whether that's buying their product, promoting their product, letting somebody know about a good experience. Thank them if you recreate on their land, if you ride a snowmobile across it, if you crossing it, you ski, you hike, you walk, you hunt. Thank you for that. We really need to and thank them for feeding us. That's sometimes we forget how blessed we are because we walk into the supermarket and there it is. It just magically is there, but it takes a lot of work and dedication. So that would be one message, I think, just get to know your farmer, get to know your neighbor, and engage with them and learn and listen and share your experiences with them as well.
Thank you. That was really enlightening, all that you do in your department. I did get a chance during COVID and after to spend a lot of time on an organic farm, and in the summer, fall, winter, and spring. And so it was just enlightening to see how incredibly hard they work. And so it's like everybody ought to do it, and so that you can just see what it's like, 4 o'clock in the morning out collecting the eggs or whatever. But my question is about the FDA. Excuse me, and I know that's federal, Department of Agriculture, no, Federal Department of
Food and Drug. Food
and Drug.
Yeah.
Okay.
We touch upon them, though.
Yeah.
We do.
So I believe that under this current federal administration, that the number of inspectors for the FDA has been decreased. So I'm wondering now, when you go to the grocery store and buy something that you thought before was inspected, it's not. And is Vermont doing anything about that, or is there any advice?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple things. There has been, we have seen a, experience in federal, particularly on the USDA side. So there was a couple of aspects early on. There was the buyouts. There was the part where people maybe didn't have enough experience or tenure, so they were let go. So we've seen a significant decrease in federal employees that are working in Vermont. When you talk about products, there's two things. and I didn't mention it, we inspect meat facilities. So there's 2 programs in Vermont. So there's the state inspection program that we do, and we have inspectors that go into plants, and that meat can only, if it's just state inspected, can only be sold within our borders. So it can't be sold in New Hampshire, it can't be sold in New York. But there is a USDA federally inspected program. So there are federal inspectors that come and inspect, and that meat can be sold across our borders. And there's a hybrid program that we also, with some certification, that we can help with as well. So on the FDA side, I'm not probably familiar enough on the FDA part of what might be involved. We do have something called, it's mainly with fruits and vegetables. We call it the Food Safety and Modernization Act, and that is, FDA gives us a grant to manage that program, and we did receive a reduction in grants from that. And what we did is, the part that we had to give up was the educational technical assistance part. So we're still doing the inspections on the fruits and veggie part in Vermont. Now, I'm just talking about Vermont. There could be a different situation because we do import a lot of food from other places. It's coming from California, it's coming from Florida, it's coming from Texas, it's coming from, other countries. But we're working on the national level to get that money restored, because this happened in every state. So if you take a California and they have a 30% reduction in California, you can well imagine what that did to their inspection program. So that's the part that we're bumping up against with that. So, yeah, food safety is really important, and I think anyone that's growing something, that's usually their number one concern is food safety. When they get something to market, they're really concerned about that. Whether you're making ice cream or you're, harvesting lettuce.
Here are 2 questions that are similar. How dependent is Vermont agriculture on immigration labor or immigrant labor? And does the department have to deal with the employees that work on the farm with their legal status?
So there's a couple of things. We are very reliant on migrant labor, so particularly in the dairy sector. But we also have H2A, H2B workers that come seasonally, so for the apple harvest. And how that works is, on that particular program, is you can work 10 months and then return to your country under that program. And there may be, and I think everyone knows, there's probably maybe, I forget maybe 3,000 to 4,000 working on dairy farms. Some may have legal status, some don't have. I don't think anyone, we don't know, but we don't play a role in that. The only role that we really play is we do inspections on housing for the H2A workers. So if they come, we have an agreement with the Labor Department to make sure the housing is up to snuff and appropriate. And that program also, they may be helping with processing chickens or turkeys as well. And part of that is they have to, the farmer pays their flight here, they have to provide housing, and they have to provide a certain wage that's determined by the Labor Department. So.
How has climate change affected Vermont farmers to date, and what do you predict for the future?
Well, sugar makers will tell you right now it's changing, and it's not as predictable. So because of the at times warming, they're tapping earlier. So I think I talked about it used to be March, but some of them are determined that they can't miss that 1 or 2 runs, so they're maybe tapping and making sure they're ready to go if it warms up in January or warms up in February. So they do that. And I think the one thing we've learned over the last at least 3 years is the extremes. So we haven't had that consistent, gentle rain that we used to get. So we get high winds, we get a lot of rain in a very short period of time, or in this other particular case, we had a drought. And farmers will say that's one thing that they're telling, that it's the unpredictability, and it's a swing from one thing to the other. And it's really hard to manage when you get a lot of rain in a very short period of time. And the other thing is we haven't had, people, and some farmers rely on haying, and haying is, you need no rain for 3 days, 4 days to get it right, and it's been really hard to predict that. So I think it is front and center, and I think farmers will tell you they've been focused on the climate long before a lot of us started paying attention to it, because they've seen the changes. But it's front and center with them, and the elements and outside, you can live and die by the weather when you're farming, and it's real. The unpredictability is, I think, the biggest challenge they're having right now.
You're ever concerned about animal welfare? Talk about cows, organic, especially driving around, seeing cows out in the field. And
No, there's a couple things. So the organic, if you talk about organic, let's just talk about organic first. So the organic has a certification process. So there's a group called the NOFA in Vermont. So they're the certifying body that deals with the organic thing. And they do have regulations on how many days out of the year they must be outside. So that part of it is part of the regulation. Most of the dairies now have something called, we'll call it a freestall. So they no longer are in a stanchion or chained. So they have an open area where they can roam inside in a barn, which has climate control. They have significant bedding. They can get feed when they want to. It's, feed 24 hours a day, essentially. And the reason that you see that is the management of that, I think, is a little easier. You may see their heifers outside because they don't have to be milked. So the milking facility may be just nearby so that they can, walk in and get milked. And the other thing is some farmers are using robots now to milk, and that's another aspect of the changing because of labor concerns and whatever. And that may be someone that has 70 cows, and there's the latest farmer of the year up north. He had, it's the Four Daughters farm. He has robots, and he manages his entire farm now, essentially with one person. And he can do it because of the robotic milking aspect of it, because the cow can be milked anytime they want. So the cow walks in, they get trained and whatever. But it's a quality of change of life for him because he no longer has to be sort of tied to the farm for probably 4 hours a day. So he tells a story about, I'm able to go to my daughter's softball game now at 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock. And the old way, before that, he probably would have been at the farm. And now when he's not doing, milking, he's probably either with his daughter or he's actually doing something on the farm. So small farmers are using this technology as well because of labor concerns. And then we have machines that also, the little robots. There's one that does manure that goes around, and it's kind of like a poop Roomba, goes around and does that. We do get, if we get a complaint from animal, we work, so we have an animal health division. So we have 2 veterinarians. We have a state veterinarian, assistant state veterinarian, and then we have some animal health specialists. So if someone calls and lodges a complaint that they think something is wrong, we go out and investigate it, and we may bring the criminal investigation side is actually done now through the Fish and Wildlife Department. So they're the authority if it's animal abuse. So if it's an animal abuse case, if anyone has an animal abuse case, they think the best thing to do is you call your local state police department. So in Williston, around here it'd be Williston, so they call Williston, I think there's a problem, I've got a complaint. Then they call the Fish and Wildlife Department, and they have a warden that goes, and they may bring us with it as the investigative body. So we've done, we do them from time to time. We had Southern Vermont, we had a significant one related to horses, and we've become the subject experts on that abuse. So it's a combination, and Vermont has just hired, they're trying to centralize this whole thing. They've hired a manager to try to pull all the different departments to get down to make it more, I don't know if efficient's the right word, but coordinated, I guess it would be more, so. Yeah, sure. I think it has. I think there are some seals, yeah. And the bird flu is spread by migration. So this is another kind of, we're going to get into another kind of weird time, because the migration, if you follow the migration pattern, so say they come from South America, they're going to hang out maybe in Texas for a while, and then they're going to fly across the country, and they're going to go to New Jersey, and then they're going to work their way up through to us. And the ones that we've had in Vermont, it's been mostly because of waterfowl getting in contact with the chickens. So they've got a little pond in the back, the ducks are swimming around in, their chickens, whatever. So the wild ducks fly in, they expose the domestic ducks and the chickens, and that's how they died. So, and then the cows is just another version of it. And then that one started in Texas, and that one spread because animals in other states go across borders much more than they do in the Northeast. That's the theory, and that's why we haven't had it.
So there's one more
Yeah.
question that somebody's been waiting on Zoom for a long time. If we could squeeze that in.
Could you comment on the importance of local farmers markets? It seems to be a particularly New England phenomenon, and do you have to regulate it?
A couple of things. One aspect is the scales. So in one aspect, we do when you put your potato on the scale, we make sure they're all certified. So that's the small part we do. We do more of an economic development. It's usually run, the umbrella organization is NOFA. So the Farmers Market Association is the one that works on the statewide, and then there's regional ones, and they usually have a market manager that works with that. And they are important because I think it is, we have several in Vermont, and if you go to the NOFA website, you can find we have a robust one in Burlington, Montpelier, but there's smaller ones. They could be weekends, but sometimes they're in the middle of the week. And a lot of farmers like to do that because it's going directly to the consumer. So you know your customer, there's not a middle person, there's not a distribution system, but it's really, really valuable. So that would be another message anytime that you can work directly with a farmer, either through the farmer's market, or we have some really cool farm stands as well that have popped up. And that's a way to really support your local farmer, because usually the person that's behind the counter at the farmer's market is the person that's grown or raised whatever you're buying, and you can have an exchange with them, and they'll work with you if you're looking for something particular. But again, very important part of the ag economy.
Thank you so much, Anson,
Thank you.
for your talk today. Be careful driving home. I'm going to shovel the sidewalk.
We got it.